I'm thinking about other churches, because Willow Creek is a big church, obviously good resources and stuff like that. But I know there's a lot of smaller churches too that may not have the resources to be able to bring in like a creative director to kind of manage the experience like that. So thinking about especially at a ministry leadership level within the church, other pastors or ministry leaders in the church, what kinds of things do you think they can do to kind of bring in more creativity into what they do without someone in a role like yours specifically?
Specifically pastors or leaders?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, having come from the secular art world, I've only been doing ministry for 3 years, so I'm also fascinated by the use of the word creativity. In my mind, it's hard for me to think of it as a noun, and that's just my own bias. And so for me, I kind of start there. For me, creativity is a way of thinking. It's an alternative way of thinking. And so that's kind of where I would suggest someone who lacks the resources to bring in a creative director to begin. What is the alternative thinking? And thankfully, if you're a Christian, we follow probably the most alternative thinker that ever lived, which is a really lucky place for us to start in terms of our creativity, if that's where you start. But then if the question is, how do we get more painters on stage? That's sort of a different conversation. When I think of like resources, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have a smoke machine or lasers or lights or anything like that if you don't have a good story to tell. And so I kind of want to move the pastor, the leader, into asking themselves, what does my community need? And how can I uniquely bring that with my story? And to me, it's about figuring out what it is you want to say and then figuring out how you want to say it. And then I think you can start, once you have that, then you start the discussion of how do you bring more creativity or more art to your experiences. And that may seem like a cop-out answer, but time and time again I see people that have lots and lots of resources, have all the sexy tools, but they have nothing to say. And so in some ways, the people who aren't resourced have this kind of blessing of the constraints of lack of resources in which to really focus on what's the alternative story that they're trying to tell through their faith community. And then what's the best way to tell that? It might be a video, it might be a monologue, it might be watching someone paint on stage. Who knows? But I always think that you have to have the content before the medium, and so that's where I would advise those people, those leaders, those pastors, to start.
Yeah, I love that. And as a blogger, that's one thing that I'm constantly interested in is telling the story. I go on mission trips, and one thing I'm thinking about constantly while I'm on a mission trip is how do I tell the story of the work that's being done. So I really appreciate that, and the way you kind of frame that up, and it's more about the message and finding the alternate ways to deliver it and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Right.